So we can get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this workshop. My name is Chloe, and this workshop is called Get Yourself a UX Mindset. So before I go into it, I just want to say that I have the chat open. So if there's, as I go through the different slides, if there's any questions, feel free to pop them in. Or you can also like unmute yourself and ask it directly, but I'll try to watch the Slack, the chat as much as possible. Don't hesitate. And also, I've asked everyone to bring a piece of paper and a crayon or a pen or pencil. There'll be like one exercise at some point where I'll ask you to draw. Don't worry, I'm not going to be judging you on your drawing skills. It's just to showcase one part of the of being a UX designer. And for this, I'm going to ask you as well to like take a photo of your drawing and share. I'll share a link later, and you can post the image directly in there. Or if you don't want to, you can just turn on your camera and show the image on your camera. Cool. All right, let's get started. So as I said, my name is Chloe. I'm gonna talk a bit about myself first. So most important thing, I have a cat. His name is Maurice. You can find him under Momo Lisha on Instagram. He's basically the best supporter for working from home since the start of the pandemic. And yes, he's very fluffy and very chill cat. So feel free to follow him if you want. I'm not getting anything from Instagram, but go ahead if you like it. I don't post often either, but once in a while when he has some funny faces. So another thing about me is I'm really into detective-like shows. And one I've watched recently, the second season, is Criminal. I don't know if any of you have watched this, but basically Netflix did 4 different shows, same context, but in different countries. And it's really interesting to see how they interview criminals and try to get into their heads. I don't know if I like detective shows because I'm doing UX and it's like we try to get into user's head and it's like very similar. But anyways, I quite like it and I highly recommend this show. But other than that, I have a background in industrial design. I studied at the Université de Montréal, graduated in 2011, so almost 10 years ago. And while I was there, I was also a TA for a class called Forms and Colors, which was given to dentists. So it's kind of weird, and they felt a bit lost, but when you're a dentist and you have to, especially when you're making crowns or like fixing teeth, you need to be able to distinguish the different levels of white or beige in the teeth and be able to replicate that exact color. And also we would hand them soaps and they had to sculpt the teeth exactly as a sample that they had. So that was really interesting. And then after I graduated, I moved to England. I moved to Manchester where I worked in service design. So service design is kind of like, it's a bit like UX, but it's more looking at a service. So for example, it could be like, okay, transportation in Montreal, and then looking at all the different touch points a user goes through that. And then after that, I came back to Montreal. I worked in research and design at a small consulting firm called Usability. It's about an hour and a half, the total presentation. So there's going to be me talking, and then I'm also going to have 4 different activities for you guys to take part of. And then after that, well, since then I've been at Shopify as a UX designer, and I worked on a bunch of different projects, from a script editor to Facebook Messenger channel, storefront search and predictive search, and lately I've been on the customers team. Cool. So if I was to say what I do, basically I try to make sense of like complex things and abstract things that don't really make sense and try to make them make more sense to users. And one of the things I like to say is that the best UI is no UI, because that is like, if you take Google, for example, there's very little, but it's so powerful. So it's kind of like finding that right balance Often we think of UI as, oh yeah, we need more and more, but actually less is more, and that's very true in UX. So this workshop is it's gonna like a very broad level overview of what UX. It's really like just the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot of things that go into UX, and with an hour and a half, I won't be able to go through all of them. But it's really like, I really want to get into, I hope you guys walk away from this and are able to think a bit more about the design process and as a way of thinking. Whereas, you know, the UI and the outcome of it is just the artifacts, but there's a whole process that goes into different products and outcomes from that. And I'll touch briefly on UX laws, and then we can take some time if there's any questions. One thing that I also want to highlight is that this workshop is, I'm not going to give you any guidelines on UI best practices or visual or interaction designs. I won't have all the answers either. Like I said, there's a lot that goes into UX. I won't touch on mobile design principles. I think we could do just a whole workshop on that specifically. And I'm not going to go into Figma or Sketch tutorials either. All right. Any questions before we start? Cool. Awesome. All right. So what is UX? Can anyone here give me their definition of UX or their understanding? Anyone? You can type it or just unmute.
It's basically how a user interacts with the system.
Yeah, okay. Anyone else has a different understanding or definition? Okay, yeah, so June is saying how a user interacts and understands the system. So yeah, that's pretty spot on. Basically, it's like the user experience is an approach of solving problems that considers people and their experiences. So you have a product that's offered and there's a person using it, and it's the whole interactions between those two that makes UX. And it's always subjective to people's experiences, emotions, and reactions from interacting with the product offered or the artifact. So if we go, for example, if we look at this, these beautiful, I don't know if all of you are in Montreal, but, and if you run into these or if you have a car, these are the beautiful Montreal parking signs. Can I ask, like, what do you guys think the problem is with these? Too hard to read, too wordy, confusing as hell. Yeah. Very, very hard to understand. Would you park there? Or when can you park there? Nico, no, you don't know? Yeah, maybe, I'm not sure either if it would be possible. So yeah, confusing comes up a lot. I'd rather walk, yeah. So there's a law in UX called Hicks' law, which says that the more stimuli that you have to choose from, the longer it takes a user to make a decision on how to interact with something. And here we have like 4 different level of information that says different things. So you're like just bombarded with choices that are hard to read, and there's no really hierarchy, and they're all kind of contradicting themselves. So it's pretty horrible experience. What about here? What do you think the problem is? It's pretty like, you know, I don't know if like, yeah, greasy flies or really not great pancake using fly insect killer. So no, well, copyright, I mean, yeah, obviously copyright is, I don't know if could be done better, but they look like the same product, but one is for food purposes and the other one is to kill insects. And they're so similar that for a user, if you have to think and you know, it's instinctively you can't really just pick the right one that you need for your purpose. It's pretty bad UX and potentially dangerous. What do you think of these rain boots now? Pretty useful, right? All right, I think you're getting to the point. Basically, when you're thinking about UX or making like products that people will interact and have a great experience with, you have to think about the desirability of things. So like it has to serve a purpose, it has to be easy to use, it has to be efficient, and it has to hold together and make sense. So all of these factors play a big role in the desirability of a product. And I really like these simple yet confusing examples because you really understand that, okay, there's definitely something wrong. They're obvious, but when we come back to UX, a lot of the time they're not as obvious, and you have to make sure that you consider all of these into your choices. So really what I'm saying is like the UX goal is to design solutions that will solve users' real problems in a meaningful way. Otherwise, if you're solving a problem in the wrong way, there's no point on, you're not really doing anything helpful for the user. And there's this quote I really like from Don Norman, who's I guess I don't know if he's the father of UX, but father of design back from the 80s. He wrote a really good book called The Design of Everyday Object. And it talks about more industrial design and like physical products, but it just translates really well to our world. There's no product is an island. A product is more than the product. It's a cohesive, integrated set of experiences. Think through all of the stages of a product or service, from initial intentions through final reflections, from first usage to help, service, and maintenance, and make them all work together seamlessly. So I think that summarizes really well what UX is. Cool. So I'm gonna talk about now the UX design process. So, and again, like I said, whether you're designing a chair or a website or an app, or the process is very similar. It's always like with the user centered to everything that you're designing. So there's a bunch of different words out there: design thinking, human-centered design, design stages, product design, UX design, lean UX process. All of these, they're like relatively the same. And so I actually Googled image like UX process just to see what would come out. And like, it's kind of linear, more or less, with like circular and loops. And it's right to a certain extent, but like in reality, like this is what the UX process looks like. It's pretty chaotic. It's pretty messy. It doesn't happen at once, and it's for sure not linear. Anyone who tells you that it is, they've been very, very lucky, because it's like you always have to go back to like defining the problem and back and forth. So I'm gonna talk a bit about trying to make sense of this chaos today. So I'm gonna focus mostly on the first part, which is the most chaotic one, and which I have divided under like think and explore. Those are like the two main phases that we're gonna talk about today, and then just briefly touch on the build, launch, and tweak. And if there's more questions afterwards, we can go deeper into this. All right, so, oops. Okay, so the think phase. The think phase really has the goal of gaining context on users and defining problems. It's a common mistake that non-UXers or people that are more junior in the UX world, they go often too quickly to one solution without really understanding like the deep root of the problem, the root cause, sorry, of the problem. Right, so yeah, so understanding users and really defining what is the problem I'm trying to solve. And then after that, once you figure that out, we can go into finding the right solution. So to understand the value of your product, you have to start by understanding, sorry, the humans using it. you have to, like, humans are very complex and they vary enormously. There's different contexts, different culture, experiences, resourcefulness level, tolerance to change, ease of adaptation, etc., etc. So like, it's really important to understand in your context with the product that you're trying to build, who are the users and how are they thinking and what are their core problems. One thing to know about humans as well, or like a fun fact, I guess, I don't know if it's a fun fact, but it's a fact that's worth noting, is that humans are have divided attention and limited mental resources. So just for context, like the average person can remember about 7 items plus or minus 2 in their working memories. So that's something important to consider when you're making like a drop down options, or like you have to show a bunch of different elements. Like, okay, knowing that they can only retain 7 items, like how can you play around so that they don't have to, you don't have to put so much weight and cognitive load on their experience. Another thing also interesting is mental models. So I don't know if you've heard of mental models before, but basically a mental model is what users believe about the system at hand. When humans make a mistake with your product, often it's because they formed an erroneous mental model. So this example, the Norman door problem, is a well-known problem with many doors in the world. I don't know why, but it should be pretty straightforward. You pull, you push, but a lot of the designs don't take into account that there's actually an already created mental model. And those mental models are based on beliefs, not facts. So it's really important to know this. It's not because something is true that it's believed to be functioning in a certain way. So again, when you think about your design, I guess like the hamburger menu is an example, is like a bunch of things cramped into one thing. Like trying to make some association with the real world of how things behave into your design will help match those mental models. Okay, so how do you understand your users better? There's this thing called exploratory research, which is, a lot of it is about doing user interviews to gain context on your users. So it really helps identify what problems they're facing, how they're currently solving these problems, identifying pain points in their journey, and identifying opportunities to innovate. And it's really important to target the right users, so you get the right insights. So just to help illustrate this, we're going to do our first workshop activity. We're going to do exploratory user interview. So I'll need a volunteer for this. Anyone? Otherwise, I'll just pick someone random. Hello, Donaya. Donaya, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. You can unmute yourself. Hello?
Hello, do you hear me?
Yes, I hear you.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
Good, thanks. Cool, so what we're gonna do for this is we're gonna pretend that we're a food delivery / takeout company, and we're looking for, we wanna innovate and we wanna do some exploratory research in terms of like, okay, well, what are our users doing and how are they doing things? So I'm gonna send you all the link. Go. Let me know if you can access it. I should see you pop in. Cool, so actually, all right. Perfect, so I'm just gonna put it here so you should see this. Perfect. Okay. Oops. All right, cool. You can still see my screen? Sweet. Okay, so I'm gonna be, so Donaya, you're gonna be my guinea pig user. So I'm gonna ask you a bunch of questions and I want you to answer as honest as possible. I'm not judging you, I'm just here to wanna hear your story and how you go about ordering food. And for all the others in the group, in this page, I want you to listen to Donaya's answer when she's going to talk about or experience and try to identify the problems that she's having. And I want you to write down on page 2 or 3 different observations that you have on what she's saying, feeling, doing, or thinking. So you can just copy, like for example, let's say this user was a male. He feels impatient because it's taking too long to arrive. So as she's talking, take notes of these and just post them on the Google presentation. Make sense? Okay, cool. So, Donaya, can you tell me, oops, 1 second. Okay, perfect. Okay, so at the end we should have something like this with like a bunch of post-its. Okay, so Donaya, can you tell me about your eating habits?
I guess they're okay. So my eating habits are fine. I like ordering a lot of food because I am so busy with school that often I don't think of having the time to, you know, cook for myself, although sometimes I do. Often, my parents do make good food too, but I am a picky eater and sometimes I have cravings. So I find myself scrolling Uber Eats to kind of see what's in the area and see what I'm craving. But also, I live in a far area, so often there aren't many options of foods. Unlike when I went to Concordia and everything was just there because, you know, everything's there downtown. But when you're really far away, you're kind of in the middle of nowhere. Your choices are a bit limited.
Can you tell me, so you said you find yourself scrolling. Can you tell me a bit more about why you're scrolling?
Typically I'm just scrolling to see what I'm in the mood for because I myself don't know exactly what I want to eat. So instead of like really looking at, hey, okay, here are the different kind of meals that maybe I could eat, I look at restaurants and I'm like, okay, what does this look like? Is this Korean food? Okay, maybe I'm in the mood for that. Oh, is this like Italian? Okay, maybe I'm in the mood for that. So I'm just looking, and then once I see like, let's say a certain type of cuisine, I just click on the restaurant and I see what they sell. And
Okay. Can you tell me about the last meal that you ordered?
the last meal that I ordered was, without doxing myself, was like this big burger, this place from a big burger place where they literally give you a burger that, I kid you not, is like 3 times the size of a normal burger. And yeah, I apparently they had good reviews. I'm like, okay, let me see what this is. Let me try their stuff. And it was pretty good.
And how did you decide on that, like to order that burger versus something else?
So essentially on the reviews page, because I wanted something quick to eat, like a sandwich and not necessarily like a big meal because I had a big assignment due. So I went and I saw the number of stars and I'm like, okay, well, this sells the sandwiches. Oh, okay, this is a burger. And they said, this is such a big burger. It's one of the best burgers. So I'm like, okay, let me get this. It should be good.
Oh. And do you ever order takeout when you're not in your house?
Oh, yeah. So often-ish. So let's say if I'm not in my house, I would like drive to a restaurant more often than not to sit there, but to order takeout instead. So
Okay.
I'd say yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you, Dorinaya, for this. So I won't go further. Like usually this would last, depending on your script, but like could be from 20 minutes to an hour, depending on how much deep you want to go and if there's specific that you're looking for. But it's really like really open-ended questions, trying to, if there's stuff interesting that are saying, like for example, she mentioned scrolling. I want to understand, okay, well, why is she scrolling? What is she looking for? Is there something? And then she was able to mention that for her, reviews are, kind of a turning point that convinces her to purchase or not. So like really, you're trying to get to understand, have understanding of what is their whole process and thought process mainly. So let's see what guys, did anyone write anything on the post-its? Yes. Oh, wonderful. And then, so yeah, this is cool. This is the first time I'm doing this remotely. Usually we're like, would be on a board and everybody would put post-it and we collaborate like this. So
Yo, hold up though. I do like my parents cooking, but sometimes I have cravings, for the record.
Yeah, it's okay. We won't share this with your parents. Cool. So awesome. I'll just move back. So basically at the end of this, you would have a map of things that they said, things that they think they do and feel when it comes to, in our case, ordering food. So that's actually interesting what you said, Donaya, about your parents' food. Like maybe we could have a category that says tastes like home, or like, you know, home warming food like your parents or whatever. Anyways, so like you try to go and like understand this, and it'll give you idea for places where you can innovate. And with this, you want to interview a bunch of different types of users. For example, Donaya is what I would call more of a browser on the left side of the spectrum. So they don't really know what they want. They're looking for suggestions, or they need more content. That's where, like, for example, reviews are interesting. Whereas on the other end of the spectrum, you'd have the hunter, which has a clear goal in mind. You know, they want pizza. They're gonna just search pizza, maybe based on the best, maybe choose it based on the best ranking or whatever, or they already have their favorites and they'll go straight to it. And so you kind of want to speak to the two ends, and one person can also, depending on, maybe like on Monday, I always want to eat the same thing, whereas Friday I'm feeling a bit more discovery. So I'll search a bit more stuff. And you also want to look at the level of expertise they have. Because a first-time user versus an expert will have completely different behavior and reaction to your app.
A question.
Yeah.
You mentioned using a script. So would you say that that might kind of remove I can't say that word, like being spontaneous from the interviews?
Yeah, so that's a good question. You want to have, okay, scripts might be to put like the wrong word. You want to have bullet points of topics you want to cover. And then from that, then you can go sideways if there's something that interesting. But you want to make sure that all your bullet points or all the questions or the things that you're trying to get answer of are covered. But because, again, we're in the early phase, really exploratory, you might not have any of those bullet points. So maybe it's just like, I want to understand how my users order food.
Makes sense. Thank you.
You're welcome. Cool. Okay, so now that we have our users' insights, the next thing that we usually do is turn those into jobs to be done. So a job to be done is a solution agnostic. It's a framework basically that results in progress when completed and is relatively stable across time. So just to give you an example, help me brush my teeth in the morning isn't good because right away you're using the verb term, the verb brush, which brush, like toothbrush, is a solution, and you don't want to go there. Whereas a better way would be, a better job to be done would be keep my teeth healthy. This way you keep your options open. And maybe, you know, it's like a car wash, little people service that comes and clean your teeth. Like, I think like try to avoid putting the solution in the job to be done will help you keep your doors open. Right. So the next work is we're going to actually do a job to be done. So I'm going to introduce you a framework to how to write those jobs. All right, so the jobs to be done framework, basically there's 3 steps. The first one is identifying the situation that the user is in. Secondly, the motivation or the force that's pushing them towards the need, and finally the expected outcome. So in our case, let's say I didn't make it up for Danaya, but like, let's say our user wants to, when they go to the park, I want to have warm food so I can eat out with my friends. So that's the situation, motivation and expected outcomes. So we're gonna go to the next slide here. And you can write it either on this page 6 or just on your paper at home, whichever one you want. So I'm gonna ask if you take 2 minutes and write some the insights from Donaya, write down 1 or 2 jobs to be done. Another minute or so. All right, does anyone would like to share what they wrote? Sharon? Okay, I'll just read one out loud and then can go on with this. Cool, so let me read this one. When I'm hungry, I want to order food so I can continue studying. Cool. And I'll just read one. When I don't know what to eat, I want to scroll through Uber Eats so I can see what I'm in the mood for. Awesome. Cool, so this I really like this one. Is interesting because, oh yeah, sure, I can post the link. There you go. Okay, so this one, when I'm hungry, I'll just highlight it. When I'm hungry, I want to order food so I can continue studying. So this one, what I like about it is that it leaves a sense of, there's a sense of urgency and like wanting something quick without being, you know, too bothered by making choices or like maybe even like reading reviews might be too long. So it's like, this opens up a lot of possibilities in terms of how we can solve this problem. So that's kind of like what we're gonna do next. So I'll just move to the next one. For the case of this, the rest of the exercise, we'll just take the one I have because it'll be easier to do, but at least you have the framework for it. So in this case, our user actually likes to go out and eat at the park with their friends, but by the time they get to the park, the food is cold. So what I want us to do is, now we're actually moving more into the explore phase. We're going to start exploring potential solutions and validate some assumptions on how we can solve this user's problem. So we have our user problem, which was the job to be done. When I go to the park, I want to have warm food so I can eat out with my friends. We're going to brainstorm solutions together. Basically, I'm not going to ask you to draw anything yet. We're just going to write down some potential ideas. Actually, no, sorry. I changed that in the workshop. Sorry, we're not going to do this yet. So at this point, you would brainstorm solution on how we might solve this problem. So the way to go about brainstorming solutions it is what we call the ideation steps. And there's kind of two phases of it. There's the first one, which is more around divergent thinking. During this stage, each team members will work independently to produce individual insights or bring their own perspective on how they would solve the problem. And then after that, everyone would share their solutions, and then we'll go in convergent thinking and make a choice on which one we actually want to move forward and validate. So let's say we've done this, and then we've converged into one solution to solve our problem, which is drone delivering food directly in parks using your phone GPS locator, right? So that's our solution to the, well, our one of our solutions that we've decided to go forward with. So at this point, we have a solution, but we want to make assumptions and hypotheses in terms of what could be wrong, what could go wrong with this, what are the risky and the unknowns about this solution. So we're going to do the third activity, which is around assumption and hypothesis. So for this one, just share the screen on the page 8. Yes. All right. So actually, like looking at our solution, so drones delivering food directly in parks using your phone GPS locator, I want you to write 1 or 2 risky assumptions that you have with this solution. So for example, just zoom this out. For example, I believe users won't want to share their GPS locator to be tracked in public spaces. So like, what are the different things that you think could go wrong with this solution? So we'll take a few minutes, and if you want to put 1 or 2 post-its each on this, and try to categorize it, whether it's a known issue, unknown issue, and how risky it is. I've put this one because like an important and unknown, because I have a big assumption that GPS and tracking actually plays a lot with the trust that users will have to give in the app to allow for tracking. So I think it's a big risk. Another minute. All right. Anyone wants to share what they wrote?
I can go.
Yeah.
Drones might drop food on people while delivering. Scary.
Anyone else?
I just put rain.
Rain? Okay. Cool. Nice. So at this point, you see, like, everybody has got a bunch of different assumptions on what could go wrong, what's at risk, what's less risky. And what the next step would be to like kind of organize these. This takes probably an hour, so we won't do this, but let's say we can pick one out of these and then move forward with it. Any particular ones that you'd like to continue with that we are going to try to solve?
I like that drones could be a hazard to birds.
Okay.
It's rain. Oh, I don't know. I can see that.
This one.
Or what about if the food is too heavy for a drone? I feel like they're not very strong.
Okay. Cool. Because what I want to do, the next step will be to draw, like sketch a concept for how we're going to solve this. So I feel like the heavy lifting one is more a technical problem than a user problem. Because I think the user, no matter what, they don't care about how heavy the food is. They just want to get it delivered for them. So we'll maybe take one that's that we can try to solve the experience for the user in that sense. So let's take this. Well, let's take this one. I believe users is the one I put down, but like I believe users won't want to share their GPS locator to be tracked in public spaces. All right. So go back to here. Okay. So at this point, we have our, basically this one, we have ranked all of these, and you want to kind of look at those that are ranked as important and unknown, and there's the one that you're going to be focusing on and that you want to test with users early on, because they have the biggest risk of not fitting either their mental models, or like they're the riskiest one. So how we're going to test this, there's this concept testing activity that exists in UX, which allows us to evaluate ideas in really early stages, understand what impacts concepts have on the problem, what impacts concepts have on the user's routine, if they're breaking anything, and if there's anything important missing. So from our assumptions, we can use very basic paper prototyping, which are quick and fun, very low resources. You get really honest feedback from users, and they're collaborative, as a good way to see if you're actually heading in the right direction with your design solution, without having to invest time in like building and the UI and like the whole anything. So it can be very hacky and very easy to do. So we're going to do this. So this is the time where you'll need your pen and paper. What we're going to do is try to validate our assumptions. So on a piece of paper, I want you to draw a potential screen that will help user validate the assumptions that you had. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to be good at drawing. Put an example from a different assumption. The goal is really to get users to talk about what your concept is about. And you can use words as much as you want. All right, so I'll give you a few minutes to to draw. You can use the assumptions here, or if you want to use the one you had already before written, that's fine as well. Any questions?
So are we trying to find a solution to this and make a UI screen?
So basically, so take your assumption and try to see like, okay, how do I validate this? What can I draw as a screen that will either, I can get a conversation with my users to get them validate or disvalidate the information that I have. And once you've done, you can take a photo and just add it on page 10, 11, or 12. June, the assumption is I believe users won't want to share their GPS locator to track them in parks. But you can also use one of your assumptions if you were comfortable with that. give it another minute. All right. Cool. So let me. Who did this? This one here to the left.
That's me.
It's you. Okay. Do you want to just quickly walk us through what you did?
Yeah, so I figured if they don't want to use GPS, they can select a drop-off zone. I have the person's location there, but like that could just be off, and they choose to either deliver to drop-off or deliver to me. And there's a location for the drone and where the drop-off is and where the person's location is if they want to share that.
Oh, thanks. Who did the drawing to the right? I don't mean to
Yeah, that's
put anyone
me.
in the. Okay, cool. Do you want to talk us through what you did?
It's just simple, just giving like what we already have, which is a GPS coordinate location. We just accept yes or no, like the tracking on our phones. So basically, if you say yes, you give the app permission that you could find you, like get your location on your phone.
Okay, great. So yeah, that is really cool. Thank you all for sharing your drawings. So one thing that you can do now with this is that you have two concepts. It took 5 minutes. You can go in front of users and let's say, Brianne, what you have is like there's a bit more to it, but we haven't validated if they actually care or not about giving their permission. So we could use Nico's drawing, show that to users and get them to talk about how they feel about GPS locations. You know, what would they need to feel confident in sharing those or not? And if really like you see that actually it's a no-go for them, then you can like right away move to your next concept, show them, get them talking about, well, in this one, like you can explain there's a delivery drop-off and like the other alternatives and see if there's more openings. So this way you save so much time and energy on focusing on actually what are the root cause problem that we're solving, and are they going to be, is there going to be any barriers to GPS sharing location in that case? But this can be true for all of your different assumptions and solutions. All right, cool. Any questions around this before I continue?
I think you're supposed
Sorry? No, okay.
all good.
Cool. Okay, sweet.
Actually, I thought of one. Would you need to ask if you want to collect data from the users that are using your app after you've launched it? Would you need to like let them know, or
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's a lot of laws and like ethics around user data. So you need like whenever there's like a terms or like agreements, you need, and if you're going to do anything and hold their data, you have to let them know what you're going to do with it. Like basically, I would recommend like talking with someone. Like we have a legal team here at Shopify that we like actually go to if we need to do anything, any changes to the personal information. There's like, especially like I think it was 2 years ago, like GDPR laws came into play. So like customer data is super protected.
Okay.
And you have to make sure that your users agree to share that information with you.
Yeah.
And then the other thing you can do also, if you don't want to draw, or if you want something a bit more higher fidelity, you can do wireframes and just use basic. Let's see, getting to the word. I didn't order it, but yeah. So you can do wireframe with like that will get you a bit more like mid fidelity, low to mid fidelity, and you can get a bit more deeper into questioning your users. Cool. So that's sort of what a good part of the explore phase is. And it's like what we've done now was very linear, but it's really like you go back and forth and like in a loop of assumptions, brainstorming, prototyping, testing on every questions or assumptions or solutions that you have. And it's really not a straight line, but it's kind of like trying to unpack all of these step by step. And then we've done a lot in the process so far, but again, before we move to interfaces and higher fidelity prototype, there's a couple of things still to do. So I'm going to talk about these few things. So the first one is user flow design. I don't know if any of you are familiar with those, but basically the goal of user flows is understanding the different paths that a user can do to complete a task. It helps also identify edge cases. There's always, it's never just super linear. There's always like exceptions and things that you need to consider, different states. And also it helps identify which of these paths are more at risk and that we might need to do usability testing because there's stuff that we want to validate even further with our users. And every of these flows, there's an entry point and there's a endpoint that you want to focus on. So in the case of our drone app delivery, if you want to start, we start at the entry point where they land on the homepage all the way to the order. And then we would add like the confirmation location. Maybe there's a new shipping method at the beginning of the app that you want to mention them to onboard. It changes the shipping options. So it's basically, this really allows you to understand, okay, what are all the different parts and the different pieces or screens that I'll have to design before going actually, because once you get into the UI, it's really easy to get caught up with, font size or like a bunch of different little details that are not that important until you actually nail the full flow of your app. And again, the core, making sure that you're answering the core problems of your users. The next thing I want to talk about is information architecture, which is key to life in UX. Information architecture is always agnostic of any single interface design concept or approach. So if we take our app, so we'll have a list of features, list of different functionalities and things that that we want the user to be able to accomplish. But we need to kind of create some organization to this. So the first thing you want to do is group and organize those features into cohesive and similarity features. So for example, we have at the top like user-related task. We need a delivery address, delivery time. We have filters that might be relevant and that kind of makes sense to put together, random information, types of services, et cetera, et cetera. And you really want to cluster those into groups so that you're forming building blocks of the information that will be on your app, on your site. And these building blocks are, again, there's no UI, it's just organizing the information. You can move them around and see what makes more sense. And then at some point, once you figure that out, then it'll look like a final app. I mean, it doesn't work magic like that, but you understand what I mean. Like everything has to be kind of organized in a way that makes sense for users and grouped together. And information architecture is a good way to do that. Any questions? Cool. And then once your IA is done, your user flows are done, you can move to higher fidelity prototyping. There's a bunch of different tools. I don't I personally use Figma because that's the tool we've been using at Shopify. We used to use Sketch and InVision. I've used a bit of Framer, Balsamic as well for lower fidelity. So there's a bunch of different tools like that, but don't let the tool guide you. Like it should be like all of these tools, basically you can end up to the same. It always depends on what you're trying to get out of your prototype. So
oh, I have a question.
Yeah.
Just in your experience, how many different versions of the same like app do you go through, from like wireframing to higher fidelity prototypes? How many versions are there?
That's a good question. It depends. It depends. A few things. If you're just like I think after like 1 or 2 rounds of testing and like talking with users, like you should have a good sense if you're heading in the right direction. Otherwise, you want to maybe just throw everything out and start fresh and like rethink your problem. But in my case, it always depends. We have a lot of stakeholders, so we have to make sure that the business needs and we have technological constraints. So sometimes we don't know those until we go ahead like far into development, and they're like, oh, actually, performance is not good enough here, so we have to rethink. So we go back to the drawing board. So it's like I can't. There's no answer really. We try to. I mean, the project I'm on, been on it for a year, and we're at our 3rd iteration. So yeah.
But only 3. I mean, couldn't you go into the hundreds of different like versions?
So okay, when I say this, I'm talking about like higher fidelity iterations. In terms of like, yeah, we've sketched like I don't know, yeah, probably hundreds of different like what did this screen could look like, and like what patterns and what makes more sense. But we try to avoid going too deep in high fidelity until we actually understand like we have our flows, they make sense, it works for business wise, like technology wise and UX wise, and then we'll move into like higher fidelity. And I think I'm lucky in a way at Shopify because we have a library, like a UI kit, so we don't have to rethink, okay, is the button, what size is the button, or what is this pattern for saving? Those are already there. So that's why in a way, I'm really more focused on the flows than the actual UI. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
No worries. Any other questions? Cool. All right. So I want to talk about a few UX laws. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I've put some resources at the end for you guys to look at those in more details. They're quite interesting, and I think if you're looking to a bit more like, especially more the UI aspect and how to group things or the hierarchy and all this, they'll be useful. The first one is law of proximity. So objects that are near or proximate to each other tend to be grouped together. Like humans in our brain, we just associate objects that are close together better than objects that are far apart. So like this example, we can see like, just because that row is separate than the other one, like we automatically associate this as 3 different groups. And it's the same thing with colors and shapes as well. So that's one thing that, again, it comes back to the hierarchy. Not the hierarchy, the information architecture I was talking about. Like you want to make sure that in your app or in your website, things that are similar in functionality or meaning are actually grouped together, because users will associate them naturally as one or of a similar things. The second law is X law, which is kind of touches on the paradox of choice. So basically there's a correlation with the time it takes to make a decision and the number of choices that you're presented. So the more choices, the more times it takes you to make a choice, and the more time it takes you to make a choice, the more chances you are to abandon. Take Netflix, for example. like how many, there's so many options, like you just keep going until you watch all the trailers and then it's 2 hours later and you give up. There's also an experiment that was done back in, I don't know, like the 80s or something, around jam. So they basically, they sold jars of jams, and in the first table, there was 6 different flavors of jams. And then in the second table, there was 24 flavors. And they saw that the table with only 6 flavors of jams was actually, a lot of people would purchase jams more than the ones with 24 flavors, because the making this decision with too many options was so hard for users that they just gave up and walked away. So that's something as well, again, like the way you organize and think about how many options you're going to present. Often we think that more is better, but it's not. And finally, the last law I want to talk about is Jacob's law, which is that you have to think that users, all the users, they'll spend more time on other sites than yours, or on other apps than yours. So this means that users prefer, they want your site to work the same as other sites. So make sure that you're focusing on using existing patterns and conventions. Otherwise, user will feel overwhelmed because they'll have to learn a new mental model or process, and instead of empowering them, you just will push them to like give up and lose and walk away. So there's no need to reinvent the wheel, especially in apps like iOS and Android have really good patterns, well known, and just try to reuse those as much as you can. Cool. So at this stage in the process, you should be getting close to like a pretty final design or UI and higher fidelity. So this is when usability testing comes in place. And this way, usability testing is a way to see how easy something is by testing it with users of your product. And it's about asking different tasks to complete. And these usually happen a lot, like not in the think phase, towards the end of the explore phase, or like as you start to build the app. If there's like not last minute, but like last things that you want to validate with users in terms of can they actually complete the task. So like I was saying, usability is about uncovering usability problems. You want to validate, can the user complete the task? And how confident are they about completing it correctly? And the more people are experiencing a problem, the more it is a problem, and the more severe the problem is. So can they actually complete the task, or how much is it blocking them from completing the task? Those will play in hand. It will have an impact on whether or not you want to make a change and you have actually a usability issue. And it doesn't take many users to uncover most of the issues. Usually like 5 users uncovers 80% of all the usability issues that you have with your product. So an example of a usability task, you want, like for this one, let's say again, with Donaya, it's 6:30 on a Friday evening, you're hungry, your fridge is empty, your parents are out, and you decide to order food on this app. You have a $20 budget. You don't want to wait any more than 45 minutes. Using this prototype, you link them to the prototype, walk me through how you would complete the task. And you really want to make sure that what you're validating here is, are they able to complete the task, and how much confidence are they completing the task with? And then the different kind of questions that you can ask, always make sure they're open questions. Ask participants to talk aloud. So everything that they have in their mind, you want them to share and speak up about it, and always ask why. So anything that they say, don't assume anything, just push and ask why. This will help you uncover. So for example, if I ask like, what comes to mind when you see the screen, and someone answers, oh, it seems nice. Well, what does nice mean? Can you tell me more? because my nice and someone else's nice doesn't mean the same thing. So you really want, again, to try to understand how they're feeling and what do they mean with the kind of answers they're providing you. So all of this, hopefully at the end, you come back and you have a product that's desirable, and you should be in place to achieve good product desirability, and you're ready to ship it to users. So a quick recap, basically for user research, there's 3 main testing that you can do. First one is the exploratory user interviews, where you're really trying to understand the context. Then you have the concept testing, where you want to go a bit deeper into certain assumptions that you have and make sure you validate this before moving forward. And finally, more towards the end, you want to really check, is my product usable, or is there any friction anywhere in there? And on the UX design side, you want to start with your problem statement, just to be done, conceptual sketches, lo-fi, and then move to user flows, information architecture, mid to high-fi mocks. And that's it. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Yeah, I actually have one. I know for like a single person just designing an app, going about finding a user would be, oh, ask your friends and family. But how would a bigger company go about finding users and letting them come in and talk out loud while you mess around with the app?
Yeah, sure. So, well, now that we're in a pandemic setting, we don't do that. We do remote user testing. So we'll use Zoom or Google Hangout, and we'll send them a link to a Figma prototype. So the way so it depends on the company you're in. Usually you have user data, like when they sign up, you have an email, like email addresses. So we do screeners. So every time let me just stop sharing my screen. Oops. Oh, okay, anyways. Yeah, so we do screeners. So basically you want to ask yourself, okay, who is my target audience? Who do I need to speak with? And I'm not talking about like age or gender or all that. Well, it could be, but it's really not marketing targeting, right? It's more like, okay, do I need to speak with expert users? If I do, how do I identify them? So for example, right now I'm building something that's a little more technical. So we're looking for more advanced technical, like users with technical skills. So we ask them, like, you know, have you used SQS, or have you used Mode, or like, what are the different tools that you've used? And if they say yes to that, then we'll go ahead and target and reach out to them. So really you want to think about, okay, who would have more to say and to validate with the specific app that I have. For example, in our case of food delivery, if it's someone that never orders, there's maybe no point of talking to them.
Yeah, okay, makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, I have another question.
Yeah.
What's the most like interesting or fun app that you worked on? Like, was it at work or like a personal project, and like why was it so interesting and fun for you?
I think it depends what I define by fun. Might not be the same idea as you, but actually I worked on a script editor. So it was like I think it was Ruby or Ruby on Rails. And so the main, and it's a Shopify app that lets you modify your checkout logic. So basically, if someone adds 2 shirts to the cart, you can change, like it gives them automatically a 10% discount or whatever logic you have. And that was really interesting because I was like, who writes code? Who's going to write these like scripts? Not our typical merchants. So we have like a not theme partners, but like expert partners that works, like agencies that work scripts, that write scripts. And so it was like, okay, I need to understand how developers, like what kind of interface they need and all that kind of stuff. So it was really fascinating because the user type was something I had no idea. Like I don't code. So it was like, whoa, okay, how do I approach that approach them and give them tasks so I can validate and make UI or UX modification into the editor interface. Tom, oh, you used the scripts? Yeah, sorry if it was not a great experience. That's my fault. And how often do you go through the whole process to update apps in UX? Elizabeth, what do you mean, like, how often we redesign them? Or like, yes, okay. I think it's like, so if I go back to, I guess this, yeah, here. So if I go back to this slide, usually, so the way we worked a lot with MVP, so minimum viable product, because it's impossible to ship all the features all at once, and it's also risky. So we tried to define what's the minimum that we need for our users to be able to complete the task. And then from that, we'll add more and more to it, because it's a lot easier to add than to remove features. Because if you remove features, people get annoyed and disappointed. Yeah, that website is cool. So it really depends. Also, because like at Shopify, we worked a lot with, there's a lot of like 10 years, 15 years of code and like legacy, if you want. So the more legacy you have, the harder it is sometimes to migrate or to change the apps. So sometimes we'll do like small tweaks. Sometimes it's full redesigns. It really depends. It's a case by case. Does that answer your question? Cool. Also, yeah, I've put some resources. I've put the link of Shopify career interns. So we do hire interns every semesters. So feel free to go. I'm not sure if it's still open for this January, but the one in the summer will be open in a couple of months. So feel free to check it out. And now that we're remote, you can work from pretty much anywhere. And I've put a few resources as well here. Laws of UX is a really cool site. I'll just click on it and show you. Basically, it has all the different laws that I talked about a few of them, but it goes into details and you can learn more specifics about it. You can download the poster. It's quite a nice little site. This one, I don't know, maybe you know that the Nielsen Norman Group, they're really like the Bible of UX. They have like a lot of articles on different things. They've been around for a long time. Really, really good, useful site for like deeper like understanding of specifics of UX. I really recommend them. Also, Norman Doors, yeah, exactly. It's from him. A List Apart, I really like them as well. They have a bunch of articles and they have, I don't know what's wrong with the header here, but anyways, yeah, a lot of topics on content, design, like processes as well. And they also have, put it here, a book apart, which is, oops. They have all of these books. Okay, cool, thanks. Yeah, this is really cool because each of these little books are like specifically, if you're more into like specific app design or mobile first, or I don't know, they have all like a bunch of them that are really, really interesting to look at. And this is the other book I was telling you about, The Design of Everyday Things by Dole A. Norman. All right, any other questions before?
Was the Norman door designed by Don Norman, or was it just?
It's so if I remember correctly, he didn't call it like that, but he was the one that came up with the concept, and then other people called it the Norman door.
Okay.
For him, yeah. Cool. exactly. I hope this was useful. Again, it's hard to know. Like, I was surprised to learn that there's no UX classes at all in computer science, which it's weird because I work very closely with web developers, front-end UX developers, back-end every day. So, and I try to involve them as much in the process because it's so important, especially when you're in bigger companies, to understand the technical constraint and them to help with the UX constraint. There's one and so on. Okay, cool. Well, hopefully this was useful and it gives you a small door opening, not a Norman door, into the world of UX. Thank you very much, and I hope you all the best.
Actually, sorry, I have a quick question.
Yeah, sure, I have time.
The laws of UX, as much as they're intuitive, maybe not all of them, it's hard to keep 20 in mind when designing, right? So is it practice makes perfect, or do you kind of go back to them when you're designing?
Yeah, I mean, I always try to, like, this was a good refresher for me, actually. But I try to, like, read a bit on them. You see it, like, as the more you do it, and, like, by the more, I mean, like, years of experience, it just becomes natural, and you just don't have to think about it. It just comes natural, and you know what's wrong. There's another, actually, I think it's on this site. One thing that you should look up as well. This one. Yes, so usability heuristics. I didn't talk much about it, but because we could have done just one thing on those. It comes back again to your question, Layla, on how do you know? And these are a good base that you can just use as a reference, as a checklist. When you're like, if you have your app or your website, you can just look at it and make sure that, okay, well, am I respecting this law? If not, like, and again, there's a lot of trade-offs. Sometimes you have to, because of technical constraints or other constraints, you have to bypass some of these laws. Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay.
Sweet.
Thank you so much.
No worries. Thank you all. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I think I'm not sure if I put my email, but it's chloe.tetreault@shopify.com.